Hello, everybody. You are in the Critical Chain Project Management webinar with Efrat. So off we go. Efrat, who's going to be presenting all this, is the daughter of Dr. Efrat Goldratt, the author of The Goal and founder of the Constraints. She was also the co-author with her father of The Choice, and has obviously been part of the inner circle of all this from the very beginning, or her very beginning anyway. Okay, and this is what all this is about. She published the book Goldratt's Rules of Flow in January of this year, 2023, and she has lots of other responsibilities. And I'm now going to hand over to her to present all this. Okay.
Hello, everyone, and I really appreciate you joining us for this exciting webinar, my very first webinar with Philip, which I'm hoping will be the first of a lot of them. We all know that projects suffer from chronic issues. We all know that projects are late, they suffer from delays, they suffer from budget overruns, we need more money to complete the project. And also on occasion, in order to get it done already and move on to the next project, we find ourselves compromising on the content and delivering less than what we promised in order to get it done. Mind you, I didn't start with saying in which areas. These are chronic problems that are common to all projects worldwide, regardless of if it's an individual project or organization or a country. We also know what is the cause to all these delays and overruns and compromises. It's the uncertainty. You ask someone, why didn't you finish on time? And you will get the answer, because this popped up, because an unexpected delay happened, because we had to deal with issues that we didn't plan for. It's the uncertainty. When my father, Dr. Efrat Goldratt, started to look into the area of project management in the early 90s, the first thing that he noticed was the issue of uncertainty and how people were trying to handle it when they were managing their projects. The most common method at the time was critical path. And after looking into it and seeing what were the pluses, what were the shortages, he offered a better method that he called critical chain. What he also noticed was that everyone is aware of the uncertainty that is causing all the delays. And everyone were trying to handle it. They were actually concealing time safeties in their time estimations. We all do that, aren't we? People are asking me, well, how long is it going to take you to deliver that project? And we know that if we work only on that one, we will be able probably to deliver in 1 week. Are we really saying, sure, I'll get it done to you in 1 week? No, we're saying I'll get it done in 10 days, right? Or perhaps even 10 days, or perhaps even 2 weeks if we can. We hide a time safety in our time estimation in order to make sure that we do end up delivering on time and that we are, in fact, not late. But we're not telling anyone about that safety. We hide it as the best that we can in all these time estimations places. When my father noticed that this is a very wide phenomena, what he did was to develop buffer management. Buffer management has a lot of details. I'm not going to go into it, but the essence of it was that he proposed that we stop concealing individual time safeties, and instead we give the time estimations that are the best case scenarios, and we keep a large buffer for everyone at the end of the project. For example, if everyone say that they can finish their task if everything goes right in 2 months, we are going to promise the client to deliver the project in 3 months. 2 months best case scenario and 1 month's buffer. Now, if someone gets an unexpected delay, uncertainty does happen, Murphy shows up, we know that. Then he can go to the project manager and say, listen, there was a delay. I need 3 more days in order to finish my part. Give me the 3 more days. We consume the 3 days from the buffer and we give it to whoever suffered the delay. This is, in a nutshell, buffer management. My father summarized his ideas of how to manage the uncertainty in project environments in his book from 1997, Critical Chain. But he's a scientist. First and foremost, he's a physicist. And scientists are conditioned never to say they know, but instead to check and double check and triple check their assumptions or the validity of their assumptions about reality. We say we all know that it is the uncertainty that is behind all those delays and all those shortcuts and compromises. Now, for the first time, he was able to systematically examine the validity of that assumption. The buffers gave such transparency. Now, whenever project managers gave someone a part of the buffer, they asked, how much time do you need and why do you need it for? What caused the delay? And when looking into the consumption of buffers, what he found out was first, yes, everyone were right. Uncertainty is a cause for delays in the project management. We all know that and we are all right. But to his surprise, it wasn't the only cause for delays. And very frequent, it wasn't the major one. There were other obstacles to the flow of projects that actually caused delays. He was amazed by that, and he decided that he was going to dedicate whatever time it's going to take in order to study flow of projects and figure out what are the obstacles that actually cause delays in projects. The first one that he noticed is one that he, at the very last minute, even put into the book of Critical Chain, and that's multitasking. I want to say a few words about multitasking. This is something that we are all familiar with. It's part of our reality. We do it to the extent that it almost kills some of us. Some of us are better in it, some of us are worse. Some of us even think that multitasking is actually a plus, a good thing. I even noticed some messages to hire project managers that require excellent multitasking skills to that extent. What my father said was that people are not aware of the devastating effect of multitasking on projects' lead time. Philip, will you share with us that slide that I would like to share with you? This is my father's favorite way of explaining the effect of multitasking on project lead time, on how long it takes us to deliver projects. Let's say that we have 3 projects, Project A, Project B, and Project C. Each of them takes 9 days. So if you look at the top row of the rectangles, we finish, Philip, help me out here. We start Project A at day 1, right? And we finish it, as we said, after
9 days.
9 days, right? And then on the 10th day, we start Project B, and then we finish it at day
18.
18? And then we start on the day 19th, we start Project C, and we finish it after
9 days.
9 days? 37 days, we are done with all of them. This is what happens when we deliver these projects one after the other without any multitasking. Now let's see what is the effect if we deliver precisely the same 3 projects. Each of them takes 9 days, but because the customers that we promise them the projects are pressing us to make progress, or our managers or us ourselves are under another pressure to get things done and to show that we make progress in each of them, whatever the reason for the multitasking is, we decide to multitask. So we start on day 1 and we start with Project A. But only after completing 1/3 of it, after 3 days, we switch to work on project B. And after 3 days, we switch to work on project C, and we finish also only 1/3 of it. 9 days have passed. How many projects did we complete?
Nothing so far.
None, exactly. So we go back, we are still multitasking, we go back to project A, and we finish another 1/3 of it in 3 days, and then we switch to project B, and we finish and we accomplish another 1/3 of it in 3 days, and we switch to project C because someone is yelling, and we have to show that we are doing something, and we accomplish another 1/3 of it in 3 days, and now we are in day 18. How many projects did we accomplish?
Still nothing.
Nothing. 18 days. If we weren't multitasking, we would have delivered 2 projects by now because of the multitasking. And did you notice there are no delays here due to uncertainty? There is nothing came up, nothing unplanned, no surprises. Pure multitasking, and after 18 days, we still deliver 0. Actually, we deliver the first project, project A, after 21 days. 21 instead of 9. Do you notice now why my father called multitasking the #1 killer of time in projects? Philip, when he talked about it, you mentioned some other things that we need to mention here, right?
Well, it assumes here that we're perfectly efficient and we're very good at switching from one project to another, right? There's no translation time, setup time when I go from one thing to another. So it's kind of optimistic, the presentation we have here.
Absolutely. And if we were realistic, we know that because whenever we switch between projects, there is on occasion a need to rework, and there is usually some setup times we need to readjust things to get to concentrate on the next project. It's longer than 21 days, sometimes a lot longer. This is the effect of multitasking. Why is it so important? Because if we say that the only cause for delays in projects is the uncertainty, there is basically very little that we can do. Uncertainty, by definition, is out of our control. But multitasking is our own doing. It's our own behavior. So we get to choose if we want to reduce the multitasking, something similar to what we have in the top row here. We will finish projects a lot sooner, and we will reduce the lead time, and we won't be late. It's up to us, and this is the key here. It's the choice whether we want to say, sorry, it's uncertainty, or we take responsibility and we say there is actually something we can do about it, because the obstacles to flow are behaviors that we are all familiar with, and we can all do something about them. There is something else that I want to mention here, which is, first let's talk about, okay, so we understand that multitasking is damageable, and we need to reduce the multitasking, to limit the multitasking in order to avoid delays in projects. And the question is, okay, so how much should we reduce the multitasking, right? In each operation, in each environment, we are actually talking about a U-curve. If we look at the number of projects in parallel that we are doing, relative to the damage, we get a U-curve. If we are on the right side of the U-curve, we just talked about it, there are too many projects that we are taking care of in parallel, and we keep jumping from one to the other, the damage is tremendous, and we get constant delays, and we won't finish on time. Also, on occasion, depending on the operation, if we handle too few projects, there might be damage, because we might have excess capacity on the constraint, because we might actually need time not to concentrate on one project, but to take some time off of it and concentrate on something else in order to get back to it and figure out something that we were stuck on. You all know what I'm talking about. But you can see that the U-curve is very close to the zero. Sometimes it's one project at a time, like the example that we just showed, and sometimes it's a limited number of projects that it makes sense to do in our operation, again, depending on the constraint, how much the constraint can handle before it's overloaded. There are a few ways to figure out how many projects we can do in parallel without causing damage. Most of us have very good intuition in order to figure it out. For those of us who don't, it usually means that we are so bad at the multitasking that we need to reduce it dramatically. There is another aspect to multitasking that I want to mention here. And it's not about multitasking between projects. It's about multitasking between tasks. We get up in the morning, we get to the office, we open the emails, gazillion emails. We try to handle the first one, and then the phone starts ringing. We handle the phone, and then someone from the next office calls us. We go to the next office, we forgot about the emails. We go back to the emails, we go to the phone. Before we know it, half the morning is over. How much did we accomplish? None. If we say that with multitasking between projects, there is a U-curve, and whenever we are anywhere at the bottom of the U-curve, it's good multitasking, it's fine, it's good enough. When we are talking about multitasking between tasks, there is no U-curve. There is no benefit whatsoever to multitask between tasks. It's only damaging us. It's only a cause for burnout, for delay, and for headaches. If we want to avoid delays, we need to get used to another form of behavior, which is you finish one task, you start another. You finish that one, you start another. Philip, you had some really good insights about that.
Yeah, well, I confirm what you said as an introduction on multitasking, which is, it's fantastic waste of people's energy, time, and quality of life. And I've got the advantage of being able to quite often to get things measured. I ask one of my colleagues to watch and measure what's going on in companies, right? And we've done this many, many times. And the strange thing is that there seems to be a sort of kind of constant in a lot of the organizations we've studied in this way, where they switch just about to the level of just not quite going mad, right? They're just making things very uncomfortable for themselves. But they have not gone over the madness threshold. And that's at about 60 different tasks a day, switching on average about every 7 minutes. And it's very strange.
Dear God. Every 7 minutes we switch to another task.
On average, right? Which, of course, if you look at the details, it's 30 seconds of this, and then, I work for 10 whole minutes on one subject. Wow, extraordinary, right? And this is whether, even companies where the people are, in fact, developing pharmaceutical drugs over an 8-year horizon, right? There's no pressure, nothing. They don't have to answer the phone for anything or answer their emails. They're working on a long-term horizon, right? Or engineering complex products over 2 years and stuff like that. And yet, they're changing tasks every 7 minutes on average. And so it's because we deal with that, and you said it, that it's in your hands, right? It's your life. You're killing yourselves. You don't have to do this. You don't have to answer all your emails all the time. And we've done this time and time again, right? For instance, you can see the videos of these cases in a big engineering to order firm, doing exactly those numbers, right? 60 changes a day in a team of 15 people. They don't eliminate multitasking, but they drastically reduce it. And the quantity of work going out is doubled or tripled, right? And the number of quality problems that they generate is divided by 10 sometimes, okay? And that's in one environment. In another environment, developing very, in luxury goods, very expensive handbags that you might have already. It's the same thing where we find that the person was multitasking so much, and this was a person who'd been in the company for 30 years and it ended up with lots of various bizarre tasks still to be done because nobody had ever taken them over from her. But she was doing a very important job. She was the bottleneck of the company in terms of developing resources, and she was just going mad and switching 60 times a day. Okay. So it should be really avoided. And I think when we're preparing this, you said you were also wanted to know how we manage this in Marris Consulting, right? Because the big advantage is I see this all the time, right? I measure it and I tell people, tut, 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 you're multitasking, don't do it. Well, I try to apply it to myself and to my company, right? So there are a few rules that we're using to protect Marris Consulting against multitasking, right? And it's not that difficult for us because we play the multitasking game very often with all our clients, right? We play that, everyone plays it, sort of every 2 weeks or something, where we ask people to switch tasks and then see what's happening, and the productivity is pathetic and they go mad and all this sort of stuff, right? So we know it's bad. So there are a couple of rules. We don't use mobile phones, cell phones, right? We don't use cell phones in the company, right? Among ourselves, okay? If I want to contact somebody, I will send them maybe a text message saying, please, when it's convenient, call me back, that sort of stuff, right? And when we're in the office, there's a way of working, which is the person will stand in the entrance to my office, for instance, discreetly without making any noise. And I'm aware if they're there. If I don't put my head up, that means I don't want to be interrupted and they will move away. But that works in all directions, right? To say that between my colleagues, it's not a hierarchical thing. Nobody is allowed to interrupt anybody else, okay? And so that's what we do. And it's, it surprises people, but it's very, very important. And the quality of life you get out of it is huge. And we just look at everybody else thinking they're mad when we see them pick up their phone in the middle of a meeting.
Well, thank you for sharing. And once again, I mean, taking care of the obstacles to flow have huge benefits as far as handling our projects much more effectively and getting much better results and also much better quality of life. But it does require discipline, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So to clean it up properly, I guess the boss has to give the example, and I'm just very careful not to push any of my colleagues into multitasking. And then it's easy to make sure that among themselves, they don't disturb each other. But yeah, it's important to give the right leadership on that one.
Very, very good point. Thank you. Well, multitasking is by definition, or not by definition, but according to my father's findings, is the #1 enemy to a lead time, but it's not the only one. It is not the only obstacle to flow. Let me give you another example. The rules to flow that I want to talk about now is called full kit or kitting. What is full kit? We are getting ready to start a project or to start our chunk in a larger project. And very often what happens is sooner or later after we get started, we get stuck because something is missing. Sometimes it's a relatively small thing, but because it's missing, we get stuck. Let me give you a classic example. I'm baking an apple cake, my husband's favorite. And I made sure that I have the eggs and the flour and the apples and the butter and all that. And I'm getting started and I'm cooking the apples and I'm mixing whatever needs to be mixed and everything. And I'm missing the vanilla extract. I'm stuck. There is no way I'm making the cake without the vanilla extract. It's something relatively small, which got me stuck. And if I have to stop everything and go to the store to get the vanilla or go to my neighbor and ask for emergency help, the cake project will be delayed. And that happens in projects very often. We get started because we think we have enough to get started and we overlook some details. We forget to ask for someone's signature or for the client's approval, or little things, or we forget to double check that the parts that we ordered, all of them actually arrived from the supplier, and we get stuck. So one of the other things that we need to do in order to make sure that we do whatever we can to avoid unnecessary delays is to make sure that we are operating with full kits. In larger operations, it means that at the entry to our projects, there is a gate. And there is a manager who operates as the gatekeeper. When a project approaches the gatekeeper makes sure that the gate is closed. There is no permission to start working on the project. Only after the gatekeeper checks with the appropriate people that they do in fact have the full kit, only then he opens the gate and the people can start working on that project. Some projects that are limited in their scope, in their length, one gate at the beginning is enough. Other projects that have a lot of handovers or that are a lot more complicated, we know that we might need a few more gates in the beginning, so not in the beginning, but throughout the project. But basically, it's a very simple concept. We don't start working unless we have a full kit. Does that make sense? Philip, I was ecstatic when you asked me to provide some examples. Does it really work? And one of my favorite examples appeared out of the blue on LinkedIn approximately a month and a half after Goldratt Rules of Law was published. It was a post from a colonel in the US Air Force. I had nothing to do with it. And he also wrote to me in person, so I have a little more details. And I would like to share that post with you. If you go on my LinkedIn account, Efrat Goldratt, you will see that post there. It's about 4 months old. And what he said was the following. Let me read it with you so you won't think that I'm inventing anything. William said the following. I previously posted about Dr. Efrat Goldratt-Ashlag's Goldratt Rules of Law. While reading it, we implemented a new meeting in the 56 maintenance group to address an out-of-control blockage of grounded aircraft caused by an acute shortage of F-35 parts. Well, parallel to posting that, he also sent me a personal message, and he explained that he was in charge of large hangars in that maintenance facility in Arizona, and they had 18 aircrafts grounded. Everyone were working as hard as they can, but you can imagine what it takes to rebuild 18 F-35 and how many parts they needed to order and how many suppliers need to supply the parts in order to get it done. And they were running around like chicken with no heads, making phone calls, sending emails, trying to get as many parts as possible, and nothing was moved. This is why he called it out of control blockage. Let me continue to read. We reduced our rebuild WIP working process and began to focus on kitting upcoming rebuild aircraft. We asked all supporting headquarters to focus on unforecasted or pop-up requirements on our few aircraft in WIP and kitting just one upcoming aircraft. What they did was two things. They reduced the multitasking to one aircraft at a time. That was their decision. And all their support team had to focus on getting all the necessary parts to build that particular number one priority aircraft. That was all the change that they did. Let me continue to read. It is astounding how quickly those simple adjustments unclog our logjam. We signaled fewer requirements to supporting agencies, so they were able to focus their energy to deliver on our requirements. The 56 maintenance group is now on a mission to lead the world in efficient F-35 sortie production. Since February 15th, that post came up, I think, the first week of March. The group cleared 11 hangar twin aircraft grounded for a combined total of 2,246 days for an assortment of issues. Friday, our longest down aircraft cleared after 960 days. That's 2.6 years. That aircraft was on the ground. Why was it on the ground? Because there were no priorities and they were multitasking like crazy between so many aircrafts, trying to get parts to all of them. Friday, our longest down aircraft cleared after 960 days. That's 2.6 years on the ground, as well as another aircraft down for 514 days. Both aircraft cleared for normal flying operations. When these two aircrafts were cleared, he sent me a personal text message. He said, I got back from a business trip, and when I landed, there were 19 videos in my text messages on my phone showing me that these aircrafts that no one believed would ever get on the air were actually flying. And he sent me one of those videos. You know, Philip, why this was a case study that I chose to share with you? One of the feedbacks that I'm getting since the book was released was, Efrat, with all due respect, your solutions are too simple. The things that you recommend, they are too simplistic. We handle heavy-duty, complicated operations. Really? Your complex operations are more complicated than rebuilding 18 F-35s? With all due respect, of course. Will you share with us some of your examples?
Yeah, I mean, we do this, basically anybody who has to assemble and put things together has this problem of not being rigorous enough with full kitting, right? So it's nearly, it's any of our clients that have that, and that's, it's more than half of them. So it's hard to know what to say. I'll just give two little examples just from this past month. One was just fun to look at, to see, and I can't unfortunately give you the picture because they wouldn't like that, but they make train seats, right? The seats you're sitting in a train, right? They were world leader and whatever, and they were late and all this sort of stuff. And as soon as you open the door of their factory, you know what the problem is, right? Because they're not full kitting, they're starting to assemble their seats when they don't have all the parts, right? And so you go into the factory and you find that it's only got, the right hand armrest. You've got a whole hall with only the right hand armrest of the seat. They haven't got the left hand one yet. And so they had a space constraint and they kept running, and it was just complete madness. Okay. And that happens so often that it's just weird. Okay. To give you another, again, example that we just finished last week, these people make fairly complex machines that do the recycling of clothes, right? Whether it's textiles or other fibers and stuff, right? They just carefully pull apart textiles so that the textile can be reused, right? And they had very long assembly lead times, and probably, as in the US Air Force case that you just mentioned, Efrat, they considered that they had a space problem because they didn't have enough room in their workshop to do their work, right? But if you looked, it's because all these machines were waiting for parts, right? They weren't being worked on. And for having done a lot of MRO ourselves, if you're not doing the full kitting right, you soon end up with your hangars full of aircraft and thinking you don't have enough room and you need more hangar space, which is, kind of crazy. Anyway, this was implemented, and it's a bit like multitasking, isn't it, Efrat? You just have to decide to do it, really. It's, you don't need anything sophisticated. It's just a posture, a leadership position. You say, from now on, we're not going to start stuff until we have all the parts. We need a full kit. That's all we did, right? We announced it. And off they went. And in this particular case, and as you just showed with your US Air Force one, the results came very, very quickly and almost spectacular. They just couldn't imagine that it was possible. They were nearly 10 weeks in assembling these machines when they started, and it went straight down to 2 weeks, just by waiting until they had all the parts before starting, right? They also increased labor productivity by well over 30% in many cases, okay? And they had a huge increase in production volumes because their constraint, which they thought was workshop square meters, wasn't that at all, okay? And so their throughput doubled, so it's, we do this all the time. And I think the thing that's really nice about it is that the results are quick and obvious, and for that reason, people love it. There's very little resistance to change.
Awesome, thank you. The question is where to go next from here. And of course, one option is for me to detail a whole list of obstacles to flow and what are the rules to flow to overcome them. But by now I know that would be a total waste of our time, and I don't like wasting people's time. The rules of flow are relevant. Some of the rules to flow are relevant to some operations and others are relevant to others. I'm yet to see an environment that all the rules to flow are applicable there. And in TOC, we are all about focusing. We are all about realizing what are the few rules of flow that are really blocking the progress in our own operation, in our projects, and focusing on figuring out how to overcome these obstacles, how to apply these rules of flow. The issue, if we want to focus, is to find a way to raise people's intuition as fast as possible to thinking in terms of flow. And the best way to do it, and my father was the first one to say it, and I couldn't agree more, the best way is to do it is to provide people with a book about the rules of flow. And while reading the book, that will be the main vehicle to increase people's operation. Since publishing Critical Chain in 1997, my father kept talking about the need to publish another book or to write another book about project management that will increase people's intuition to the rules of flow. And he kept saying that once he figured it out, the right time will come and he will rewrite that book. And when he started talking about the fact that the right time is coming, he passed away. And for a very long time, no one did anything about it. I kept asking people, will you write the book? Will you write the book? And they said, well, I don't have the name Goldratt, or I don't have the capabilities to write a business novel. And the plan was to write that book as a business novel. And people started pointing at me. And I said, I don't know if I'm the one to do it. That's stepping into rather large shoes. But finally, it didn't make sense not to write that book. I think so many people can benefit from increasing their intuition about flow. And it doesn't make sense that that book will not be available. And finally, during COVID, when everything else, all my other projects were frozen and I found myself stranded at home, I ran out of excuses and I sat down and I wrote the book. And it was published by North River Press in January, as you said, January this year. And it's available. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And I'm very happy to say that I am 6 minutes ahead of time finishing my project of talking.
I just put on the screen the copy of your cover of your book, the copy of the back cover. You didn't mention it, but it's still in the novel form and follows on with the same people of Critical Chain, right? Which is fun. It's also available in the Audible audiobook form. Okay.
So now I can actually tell you that I know that it takes about 4 hours to read the book.
You're being very modest about the success it's having. I just mentioned discreetly, it's already been translated into 6 languages or 5 new languages. Is that right? And it was only published in January, right? Which is shows what the enthusiasm of everybody who's discovered this book is, and for having, of course, read it and recommended it and stuff. I can understand why it's for people like me. You think, well, at last we have that book, and as you say, it's written by Efrat, which is a kind of continuity in with regards to the initial ideas, and that's a fantastic thing. If I may just put in a 20-second bit of advertising. If you find the book doesn't give you all the answers, you might be interested in the online course that we're launching today on Critical Chain Project Management. It's a set of 36 or 35 lessons, video on demand, and you've got the details there, and we're launching that today. Its ambition is for people to be able to understand all the details of what they might have to do in implementing the full critical chain. Okay, so that's that. We're now going to go to the questions and answers session. Okay, my first question is, which is the first book we should now read if we are interested in this theory of constraints approach to project management? Critical Chain, 1997, or Goldratt's Rules of Flow, 2023?
Well, I actually asked my publisher because, I have the highest regards for Critical Chain. That has been the bestseller about project management at TOC Way for 2.5 decades now. And I asked him, what should I do about it? And he said, Efrat, rest assured that you shouldn't have any doubt. The #1 book should be Rules of Flow, because we don't waste people's time. And what we need to do is to increase people's intuition about managing flow. And if they are interested after they finish that in the earlier book, which talks about managing uncertainty, that book is still available and should be the second one to read.
Okay. There's some questions. I'm having trouble with the questions because there are 150 people firing questions at me. So I'm looking at the ones for the book. Is the book going to be published in China, in Chinese? Is the book going to be in Hebrew, etc.? So that, can you from memory say what languages it's coming up in?
Oh dear. Okay, let's see. I know that the first one to actually pick up the ball and translate the book is our Polish publisher, Mint Books. And I know that the book is already translated and already edited, and they are now working on the cover. So this will probably be printed rather soon. Other translations that they're working on is the Finnish translation. I'm working on the Spanish and Portuguese translations, translation to Italian, translation to Hebrew. Yesterday, the translation that I actually did went into editing, so that will be available rather soon. And hopefully, Philip, one of our next projects will be to make it available in French.
Get the book in French, sorry, no multitasking.
Please don't, yeah.
Yes. So that's great, wonderful. And as you mentioned, that the audio book version is already starting to appear, at least in English for the moment. Okay, so let's go through some of these questions. We're not going to have time to answer them all. The ones we cannot answer live right now, we promise we will answer them by email. Okay, there are several that basically are asking about sort of where shall I start? I think it's the best summary. Apart from they've understood from you just mentioned it, maybe reading the book, right? And then what next?
Well, actually, it's a very good question. And I think it's just like in The Goal. We know that people call The Goal a documentary because very many people who read The Goal were able on themselves, on their own, to figure out where is the constraint and figure out how to manage their production floor much more efficiently and much more effectively. And they were able to figure it out just from reading the book. I made a tremendous effort in the way that I wrote the book to write it as linear as possible in order to be helpful to people who would like to do it on their own. And as I showed you on LinkedIn and in other case studies that are starting to accumulate, I'm proud to say it's successful. In more complicated situations, on occasion, people need some help. And there are consultancies around the world. Goldratt Consulting is operating worldwide. Marris Consulting is operating not only in France. Goldratt UK in Britain is also operating in Australia. There are consultants worldwide who were part of the inner circle that learned the rules of flow as my father were developing them and are familiar with that and get their advice on where to start and get started. Okay,
thank you. Another one, and again, I'm doing a concatenation of 2 or 3 questions here. And I won't give the name of the person whose version I've chosen because he might get himself into trouble because the text is, how do we reduce multitasking if my management does not have the courage to freeze projects or reduce the number of simultaneous projects in the company? That's why I'm not giving the name of the person who said that, right? And can I just step in before you answer, Efrat, on that one, because this is something that's very close to my heart because it is quite difficult, frankly. It's easy enough when you're, I don't know, a smallish firm with maybe a few hundred people and a tightly knit management committee. They can take that decision, that's fine. In a big multinational with sort of a matrix structure with vice presidents all over the place, they each have part of the portfolio and nobody wants to give up anything and stuff. And it's really difficult to try and reduce, or A, to get stable priorities, and B, to reduce, freeze anything, right? So in those environments, what we've just done is to break the problem into lots of little bits, okay? And we impose the 2-for-1 rule, which is you are not allowed to start a new project until you have finished 2 projects, okay? So they fight about it all the time, but at least little by little you're going in the right direction, okay? So that's one of my answers if you have that, and you know, it's quite frequent. Don't think you're the only one suffering from this. We have a lot of trouble in many organizations, especially large ones, implementing any kind of freeze because you know, everybody's fighting for their own bit. And you want to say something about that, Efrat?
I think that question is spot on and is a very valuable and relevant question because this type of the organizational changes, we have to get the managers buying. If it's bits by bits with their 2-to-1 rule or one way or the other, we have to get their buy-in. These are top-down changes, and it's very, very hard to implement them in just one unit. Get the buy-in. This is part of the reason why I wrote the book, because it's, you know, give someone the book. I don't know what to say. You know, these colonels from the 56th Division try to get buy-in for other maintenance organization, Air Force bases to do it. And one of the results is that I am invited in 1 month to go to Washington, D.C. to give a speech about the rules of law in a U.S. Air Force summer summit in order to help the people above get buy-in. It's an issue and we need to take care of it if we want to really get results.
Right. I have another question here, which obviously was triggered by what we just said, and this one is not addressed only to the author of the Goldratt's Rules of Flow, but the co-author of The Choice and the daughter of Eli Goldratt, because the question is, I'm convinced, but I'm having a hard time convincing my manager. What are the best tools to learn Socratic teaching to influence management?
Gosh. I think that in order to convince other people, you have to talk about things that you're knowledgeable about and that you're passionate about. So whoever asked that question, use whatever you're knowledgeable about and passionate about in order to get the buy-in.
Okay. The next question, you'll see the questions that people have written. Some of them are not questions, they're just remarks, right? So you'll see, you can blush later. A fantastic book, a great book. The best book on critical chain and all that stuff. They're meant to be asking questions, but they're saying lots of nice things about the book, right? So yeah, it's a good read.
I gotta tell you, when I started writing it, it was very apparent that the easiest way to write it will be to have it 400 to 500 pages, and then to include everything and deliver all the know-how that we have. And it was also apparent that that's not the way to go, because people today don't have the patience and don't have the time to go through a 500 books pages in order to increase their intuition of flow. And that's why I did my absolute best to go to the bare minimum. And you will see I painfully took really, really important and interesting parts out of it. And it's 170 pages. And I'm hoping it gets the job done.
Great. Okay. As you know, in project management, if you want to try and finish your projects on time, you should aim to finish them a little early. So you and I decided we want to finish 1 minute before the end, the official date moment, right, to get this across. So we've got 4 minutes to answer this last question. What are the qualitative impacts of adopting the rules of flow in a project environment on non-quantifiable stuff? Okay, and my hint as an answer is no one wants to go back to hell. So what are the, apart from, you know, finishing your projects faster, more projects, finishing on time, what's the change in quality of life?
Well, what I found is that in today's reality, the amount of noise and the amount of pressure that we get from the constant multitasking and from the frustration of having to work so hard and still get things late and still get budget overruns and still having to compromise, it's really a major cause for today's burnout and for today's stress. And if we choose to get a handle of this, it does require discipline, but we are getting the gift of sanity back.
Absolutely. Can I, often people step into critical change because they have an operational or financial problem, they have to finish their project and stuff. But we also, about a third of our clients are already the best in the world and making a lot of money and stuff. And for instance, the world leader in luxury goods came to us and said, I want to do critical change. I said, okay, why is that? Well, we've got project managers that, they're suffering. They sometimes even work at weekends, right? So they wanted to make sure that people stop suffering with their projects. That's why they wanted to do critical change. I don't think anybody can imagine until they've done it, and look back, the difference there is between people doing it the old traditional way and people doing it the critical chain way. I mean, there's a quiet calm and visibility that people would imagine is impossible, right? I mean, people start with projects thinking it's going to be tough, it's going to be rough, it's going to be late, it's going to cost too much, we're going to scream at each other, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. Anyway, that, if we want to finish 1 minute early, is it, isn't it, Efrat? So thank you so much for accepting it, and I hope we will be doing many more of these webinars, because we just did 2 of the 8 bits of the rules of flow, so maybe one day we'll do some of the other aspects. Thank you so much, and bye-bye, and thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.